Hello, this is Craig from Rize Bikes. I'm here today to show you how to replace your Cadence sensor on your bike. The four primary tools you're going to need: flathead screwdriver, 8mm Allen wrench, a 16mm wrench or adjustable wrench, and a crank extractor. First thing you'll do is use your Allen key to remove the bolt that's on the inside. Now sometimes it can be really tough because as you pedal, it kind of tightens itself. It can use a lot of force, but it goes counterclockwise. So once you've removed the bolt, just make sure you put it aside. You will need it for later. Next, you'll grab the crank extractor and you will carefully thread it in a clockwise motion into the crank arm. You want to be careful. The crank arm is aluminum, and much like the warnings with your pedal, if you are too forceful or mis-thread it the wrong way, you will strip the crank arm as it is just aluminum. So the same precaution is relevant. Just be gentle, it'll go in on its own. Once you feel it being hand tight, that part's good, and now you're looking at the back half of it. You'll then proceed to screw that in clockwise again until it stops. Once it's stopped, this is where you'll need the wrench. Now, when you're turning it clockwise, you want to make sure you're holding the pedal in some fashion. This will have a tendency to get harder and harder to bolt in, but don't let that scare you. Keep going in that clockwise motion, and before you know it, it'll suddenly get easier and easier. When the crank is on the bottom bracket, it's held on really tight by slight angling of the metal. So it's stuck by kind of like a pressure. This is forcing the pressure away. So you got to basically work it out. And eventually, you will get it to a point that you could do it by hand, and the crank just slides right off. You can then, of course, remove the crank extractors. You won't need that anymore. So here's where you will find the Cadence sensor. Usually from the factory, it is on quite tough and stiff, so it will take a bit of force to pull off. This is where the flathead screwdriver comes in handy. Now, before you take it off, you're going to want to pull on the wires to make sure that you can get to the connection plug. The connection plug will usually be going into the frame underneath the bike or on the front side here, depending on the model. And our newer 2021 models are going to have a containment like this where the controller is. In that case, you could easily remove this cap to get to the controller to get to the wire if it's tucked inside too tightly. Normally, you can actually pull it out. When you are about to unplug the Cadence sensor, make sure you grip both ends of the plug when you pull. You don't want to damage, of course, the end that's going to your controller when doing this. When you're ready to remove the Cadence sensor, this is where you'll want to use the flathead screwdriver. Just carefully work it in and pry it out. I mean, you can try tugging on it to see if it'll come off on its own. It could. If you're having difficulty, just gently prying it off. If your Cadence sensor is broken, if you break it again and further, it doesn't make much of a difference. There we go. We have removed the Cadence sensor. Now, the process to replace it is pretty much exactly what I just did, but backwards. There's one little thing to note. You will see in the bottom bracket there are little grooves. On the Cadence sensor, you will also see that there's little notches for those grooves. When putting it in, you just want to make sure that you're lining them up. So make sure you put the Cadence sensor on the same direction that you found it, and you just simply slide it on. So if you're finding it rather tight to put on, at this point, getting a rubber mallet and a socket, or in this case, I'm actually using a bottom bracket remover. Stick it around the bottom bracket, touching the Cadence sensor, and lightly tap it in. Once it's in place, you can then plug it back in. Now when you're lining them up, make sure the tab and the notch on the female end are lined up as well as the prongs, and be gentle. If you bend them, it won't work right away and you'll have to replug it and take care. You'll know when it plugs in correctly as it goes in with no resistance. If you feel some resistance, retry again. You can always check the female end for scratch marks from where the pins were scratching at it. That'll show you where you were misaligned. Now once that is set, all you need to do is put the crank arm and pedal back on. Make sure you're putting it on the opposite direction of the one from the other side. You don't have to bang it on or anything like that, just place it on. When you put this bolt in and tighten it up, that'll secure and tighten it all together. So you just lightly hand tighten this one in. And again with your 8mm, you're going to tighten this up. Now once you get it to basic hand tightness, you're going to want to get it a little tighter. Basically, you're looking at 35 to 40 Newton meters. But if you at least give it some good tightening, a good solid hand tightening, it'll be good. It may take a little bit and it will be a little tough as taking it off. You've now got to reapply the angled metal together. So it will be a little stiff to get in. You'll know when it's ready. Pretty much just like that. I can't really get it too much further without a lot of difficulty. And that's how you change the cadence sensor on a Rize bike. Thank you for watching.